is up, listeners? Welcome back to another broadcast of Schlide Into Sports live on 103.1 FM on WVLP Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Schleier, a.k.a. Schlide. And the first thing I gotta say is Paul Feinbaum. As you know, many of you listeners know, he is the biggest one-sided beef that I have really ever. Paul Feinbaum, you better pack your bags, buddy, because there is no SEC team in the college football playoff national championship again. And the reason why I say that is because in the preseason, Paul Feinbaum said that if there was no SEC team in the national championship again, he was going to pack his bags and he was going to leave the United States. Well, Paul, it's time to hold up your end of the bargain there. It's time to hold it up. Pack them bags. But in all seriousness, though, Ole Miss, they played a fantastic game against Miami, and it was insane. I mean, just looking at the time of possession, Miami had the ball for about two-thirds of the entire game, like a little more than two-thirds of the entire game, and yet Ole Miss was one play away from getting the victory. So Miami had 41 minutes, 22 seconds with the ball on offense. Ole Miss had just 18 minutes and 38 seconds. And a little bit more than 11 of those minutes came from the first half. So in the second half, they had the ball for about 7 minutes, maybe 6.5, but 7 minutes. Like, that's insane. And they were still able to put up 13 points. They put up 13 points in the first half, 13 points in the second half. But wow, I mean, Trinidad Chandler also, I feel bad for him because, you know, they lost, and then literally the next day, I kid you not, his waiver for another year of eligibility got denied. So Ole Miss is petitioning that, but wow, just what a game. And Miami proved that they can hang around in a rock fight. They've shown in previous games in this playoff that they are able to dominate, which is what they did against Ohio State. And they proved against Texas A&M that weather conditions might not be ideal. Our kicker might not be hitting his shots or, I guess, kicks. But we're still going to be able to come out and pull away with the victory. And Ole Miss, they're kind of the opposite. Like, their offense is just so explosive that they really don't need that much time with the ball. And the reason I say this is because last week I said that Miami was going to dominate the time of possession of the ball. The question was whether or not it was going to be like Oregon Ole Miss, or Oregon Texas Tech, where Texas Tech didn't really have the ball for too long. And I mean, they had an explosive offense for the entirety of the year until they played Oregon. So the question was whether or not we were going to see that with Ole Miss, just because of the way that SEC teams have been playing in their bowl games, in the playoffs so far. So for me, there were some questions surrounding this Ole Miss team a little bit. But Ole Miss, they showed that they can fight, and they don't need third downs either, because they only needed to convert 2 out of their 10 third downs. Otherwise, they were just marching their way down the field, converting on first or second down. Both teams only punted the ball 3 times, which really just goes to show how explosive both the offenses were that day, because I'm sure Mario Cristobal was telling his team in the locker room, especially the offense, like, hey, you guys are going to need to be on your A game today, because Ole Miss, if our defense gets tired, our offense is going to need to put up points, and that's what they did. And this is the most amount of points that we've seen Miami put up all playoffs. We saw them put up 10 against Texas A&M in the first round. We saw them put up 24, I believe it was, in the second round against Ohio State. And then now we see them put up 31 against Ole Miss. So it seems like the Miami offense is starting to heat up at around a good time, but that is not what we can say about Indiana's defense or offense. No. Indiana's offense they've been on fire the past 2 playoff games, because, oh my God, they put up 56 points against this Oregon team, a top 5 Oregon team that they played. And the main narrative surrounding this was, well, it's hard to beat a good team twice. Oregon, they're going to be able to correct some mistakes that they made. They're going to go in with some extra motivation. Indiana, they might be going into this game thinking, oh, we beat this team before. We'll be able to do it again. It won't be a problem. But that just simply was not the case. Curt Cignetti, he prepares his team way better than that. And, I mean, I was at this game, and the atmosphere in Atlanta was actually insane. It was, like, I swear, 95.5 Hoosier fans. It was a majority Hoosier fans. And I said this to my parents, and I said this to other people that I was watching the game with that were IU fans. I told everyone, I'm like, I swear there is more people from the Oregon band that are in attendance of this game than there is Oregon fans, which was nuts. Like it quite literally was a sea of crimson. It was all cream and crimson surrounding the whole field, except for like the small band section that Oregon had and a couple of rows next to them where there was fans that were probably family members of the football team. And then there was a couple tiny spots of green within the stadium as well, but they weren't really that visible. But it was insane. Fernando Mendoza, he puts up more touchdowns than incompletions, and that's something that he's done quite a few times this season. This is probably the best team that he's done this against. Because this Oregon defense, they are no slouch. They are a great defense. But when I was watching this game, and it wasn't going to be obvious within the first quarter, but after the first play of the game, I knew that game was over. I knew it was wraps because Dante Moore had talked about how, I believe this was in a pregame press conference, how he made the moment, the Indiana-Oregon game in week 7 of the season, that he made it too big for what it was and that he wasn't going to do that this time. But when I saw the interception, I just had a feeling that they were going to be rattled right off the bat. And I'm sure that, I mean, they said they prepared for Atlanta to be like that. They prepared for silent counts, but I don't think anything like in your mind can truly prepare you for majority Indiana fans. And when I say, like, again, when I say majority, it was basically everybody. It was basically everybody was Indiana fans. And for the national championship game, I think it's going to be more of a neutral site game than people are thinking it's going to be, because I saw on SeatGeek that 47% of people that bought tickets for the national championship game were from the state of Indiana. And people were saying that Miami was going to make this a home game and that it's going to be easy work for Miami to fill the stands with their fans. But I don't think they've met the Indiana fan base yet. We travel. If we didn't show that in the Rose Bowl and if we didn't show that in the Peach Bowl, then they have no idea what's coming in the championship game. I'll say that much. But yeah, just a true spectacle of semifinal games. I mean, we knew going into this weekend that these semifinal games are going to be absolutely electric, with Indiana and Oregon, two teams that have never won a national title, competing for another opportunity in the case of Oregon, and for the first opportunity for Indiana to go and claim a national title in college football. We had Ole Miss on a path to spite their previous head coach, Lane Kiffin, and get a national title after he said that he would have a better shot at getting a national title at LSU, and Miami going for their title to play in their home stadium for the first time, or, going for a national title for the first time in 20 years and playing that national title game in their home stadium. There was just so much on the line for these semifinal games, and it showed. It really did show. But yeah, it was just absolutely, truly amazing. I can't think of another word for how awesome it was to watch these games. And for the Fiesta Bowl, for the Miami Ole Miss game, I was driving to Atlanta with my family, and we have a minivan, and it was I think it's a 2016. It's either 2016 or 2017, but it has like a 12 or 14-inch TV in the back. And my youngest brother, shout out to AB, he has this cord with HDMI on one end and USB-C on the other end, and he screen shared the game onto the TV in the back of our van. We also put the screen up in the driver's seat so that way my mom could watch and my dad could watch, whoever was driving. You know, obviously they're going to have their eyes on the road, but the person in the passenger seat was able to watch the game because the TV is in the back of the car. It's not in the front. So having it in the back for whoever's in the passenger seat was ideal. But yeah, that just kind of going back a little bit more to this Ole Miss Miami game. I know I'm kind of going back and forth here, but one of the things that I wanted to bring up about this game after talking about the Indiana-Oregon game was penalties. And the reason I bring that up is because something that has been talked about with this Indiana team is that they don't commit a lot of penalties, and if they do, they're very minor, and the other teams that they play make more mistakes. Out of all the teams that played in the semifinal games, Miami came away with the most penalties. They committed 10 penalties in their game against Ole Miss, which cost them 74 yards. Ole Miss committed 4 penalties for 34 yards. Oregon committed 5 penalties for 43 yards, and Indiana committed 5 penalties for 23 yards. So that, I think, is going to be a big factor in the national championship game that is coming up on Monday next week. I think it's Martin Luther King Day. I'm pretty sure it's Martin Luther King Day. I could be wrong, but no, that will be Martin Luther King Day, because normally Martin Luther King Day is the week after the first week of school for the spring semester for college. So, yeah. Okay, so now I kind of want to talk a little bit about the Oregon versus IU stats, because obviously Indiana was way ahead in points. Way ahead. But statistically, when you're looking at the total yards, passing yards, rushing yards, yards per play, first downs, third downs, they're very identical. Indiana and Oregon are very identical. Oregon actually had more total yards than Indiana did, 378 versus 362. Oregon also had way more passing yards, which that was expected going into this game, with Oregon having their running backs mostly out or in the transfer portal. Just not a lot of depth at the running back position going into this game. So Oregon threw for 285 yards, IU threw for 177, and Indiana rushed for 185 yards, and Oregon rushed for 93 yards. Indiana had 6 yards per play versus Oregon's 5.7 yards per play. So literally, again, both of these teams are, they're producing the same amount of stats. First downs, Oregon actually had more first downs than Indiana did. And a large part of the reason for this is because Indiana had short field at certain points of the game. Blocked punt, fumble, dropped balls that were all in Oregon's territory. So Indiana had short field for some of the possessions of this game. Third downs, Oregon was 8 for 13. Indiana was 11 for 14. Again, only 3 third down conversions separated these two teams. They both had to convert around the same amount of times as well. Oregon was 0 for 2 on fourth downs. Indiana was 0 for 0. Oregon ran 6 more plays than Indiana did. They ran 66 plays versus Indiana's 60 plays. And Dante Moore got sacked 3 times. Fernando Mendoza got sacked 1 time. And, we talked about the penalties already, very similar. And we also talked about mistakes. Now, mistakes, Oregon fumbled the ball twice. They lost both those fumbles. And obviously there's 1 interception thrown. That was the first play of the game. Indiana, a common stat line that you'll see, fumbles lost 0, interceptions thrown 0. And both teams had around the same amount of time of possession. Indiana had the ball for slightly longer than Oregon did, for 31 minutes, 13 seconds. Oregon had the ball for 28 minutes, 47 seconds. So every stat line was very similar except for the amount of points that were put up on the board. And that's because, like I've said before, this Indiana team does not make mistakes. But if you make a mistake, this Indiana team capitalizes on that. They capitalize on their opponents making mistakes. They play fundamental football, run-pass option, good defense, and disciplined on the line. Like, you don't really see a lot of false starts. You don't see a lot of offsides. The only penalties you might see are pass interference. That's pretty much it. You really don't see a lot of penalties from this Indiana Hoosier team. And Miami, Carson Beck, he threw an interception in this game. If that happened, if that happens against Indiana, then that could cost Miami the game. That could be something that costs Miami the game. And Miami and Indiana both play very similar styles of offense. Both love to run the ball. They can throw the ball if they have to. I think, like I've said before, I think Fernando Mendoza is better than Carson Beck. Both are very similar in talent, or at least, from eye test, not from ratings. But the talents that both the teams have at the running back position and the wide receiver position is top notch. They have amazing wide receivers and running backs that can make big plays. Defensively, I think Miami has the advantage on the line of scrimmage. I think Miami's defensive line is very strong. Indiana's offensive line is also very strong. I'm very curious to see how that matchup's going to go. But yeah, those are I guess that's a recap of the Fiesta Bowl and the Peach Bowls. Both fantastic games. I'm not going to offer a prediction just yet on the Indiana versus Miami national championship game, because next week, the next broadcast we have, it will be the day of the national championship, or I should say the morning before the national championship. So I'd much rather offer a prediction then than offer one now. And I have already made a prediction for the national championship game, technically, in the previous broadcast, because I said that both Indiana and Miami were going to win their games. I said both Indiana and Miami were going to be in the national championship last week when I was breaking down the two games based on what the teams have done in the playoff, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And it went about the way I thought it was going to. I didn't think Indiana was going to blow the doors off of Oregon like they did. I did think the Miami Ole Miss one was going to be a little bit more of a rock fight in a way that I don't think anyone really expected. I will say in the first half, Ole Miss's kicker did come in clutch for that team. But yeah, it was a very, very crazy semifinal set of games. And I'm very curious to see what the numbers are for both of those games, viewership-wise, because I haven't seen the numbers yet, but those numbers will be big. I can guarantee you that. Those numbers, I'm sure, were huge, especially, even though it was Thursday and Friday, those numbers, I'm sure, were just through the roof. Okay. There were some key college basketball games I did want to go over. Some pretty interesting wins, some upset wins that I wasn't expecting, but at the same time am kind of happy for various reasons. The first one, Texas-Alabama. This was in Tuscaloosa. So Texas goes on the road and beats Alabama 92-88, and The only reason I'm happy about this one is just because I grew up watching a lot of Arizona basketball, and I saw a lot of Sean Miller coaching that team and what he did with that team, and then he got let go for some BS recruiting stuff that I'm not really going to go into. Obviously, those, he then went to coach at Xavier for a few years, and then he took the Texas job after the previous Texas coach got fired. But I was really hoping that he would find some kind of success at Texas, and I think beating a ranked Alabama team is success. I mean, that's pretty good, especially for his first season there. And that's a pretty big win there. It was very even in the first half, 46-45, 1-point game, Texas with the lead. And in the second half, Texas 46, Alabama 43. So Alabama kind of slowed down a little bit at the end, but that is what it is. Both teams, kind of like with the Indiana-Oregon game, statistically very similar. Like, very similar. Both teams are shooting around the same efficiency in field goals, three-pointers, and free throws. Both teams had around the same amount of rebounds. Texas with the slight edge on offensive rebounds and defensive rebounds and total rebounds, but in general, it was around the same. Like, both on the defensive and offensive side, they were within 4 of each other. So it was a very, very close game. And that's something that you would see in an in-conference game. You see these weird close games that happen. And, I mean, we saw that with Michigan-Penn State a little bit ago. Penn State just kind of hanging around. It was at Penn State. It was over winter break. These teams, they can find a way to hang around if you're within your own conference. I think it is a lot harder to play within your own conference than it is to play outside of your conference. Simply because these games, the in-conference games, there is more stakes to get into the March Madness tournament. These games matter a little bit more just because if you look at it this way, the way March Madness is set up, if you're a conference champion, you're automatically in. So you could lose all of your out-of-conference games, but so long as you make it into your conference tournament, you win your conference tournament, you're in the March Madness tournament. I mean, we saw this with NC State 2 years ago now, where they were seeded last in the ACC tournament. They went through every team that they were put up against in the ACC tournament, won the ACC tournament, had a play-in game, and then made it all the way to the Final Four to play Purdue. So these in-conference games, they mean a lot, especially in the Big Ten, because the bottom 4 teams in the Big Ten, I think it's either the bottom 4 or the bottom 2, but those bottom teams, they don't make it into the Big Ten conference tournament. So they have to win their in-conference games in order to get a high seed within the Big Ten conference tournament, or to get a seed, really, in the Big Ten conference tournament. Speaking of the Big Ten, Michigan, they take their first loss of the season to the Wisconsin Badgers, 91-88, and this was at Michigan. So, huge win for the Badgers. They actually started off down a point in the first half. They were down 37-38, but then they outscored Michigan 54-50. So, kind of like the Alabama-Texas game, very even for the most part. Okay, second half, Wisconsin gets slight edge. Field goal percentage, about the same, but Wisconsin had a huge edge in the three-point percentage. Wisconsin shot 15 for 33. Michigan shot 8 for 25. So Michigan was just not hitting from the outside. And free throw-wise, Michigan, they had 91%. Wisconsin, 78%. So Wisconsin's not as good free throw percentage allowed Michigan to stay in the game a little bit, but because of those 3-pointers, huge advantage to Michigan or Wisconsin. Like Wisconsin made almost twice the amount of threes that Michigan made in that game. That's huge. Huge for Wisconsin. But yeah, not a lot of offensive rebounds. Both teams had the same amount of defensive rebounds, which I don't think I've seen that before. And Wisconsin, they had the edge in steals. They had 5 steals compared to Michigan's 1 steal. And I think Wisconsin was probably watching film on the Michigan-Penn State game because Penn State was forcing Michigan to turn the ball over through steals. So I think Wisconsin definitely took some notes for that game, I will say. Then we've got another SEC game. Florida, Tennessee. They played on Saturday. Florida might be back. Florida's lost 5 games so far this year, but they take a huge in-conference SEC win over Tennessee, who Tennessee was ranked. Florida was not ranked when they played, so technically this is an upset. But Florida won 91-67. Major win for Florida right there. And neither team was really shooting that efficiency from the 3-point line. 40% for Tennessee, 30% for Florida. Pretty bad efficiency for Florida. Florida did make more threes, though. But for a team last year that was pretty hot from beyond the arc, not good. Florida also was more Florida was more efficient on the field goal side of things. They shot for 48%. Tennessee shot for 43%. But Florida, again, turnovers, or I should say steals, 13 steals to 7 steals. That's big. And both teams actually were turning the ball over like crazy. Tennessee, 18 turnovers. Florida, 10 turnovers. Not good for either team, but I think it says a lot more about their defenses, if anything. But Tennessee, in a game where you have 29 free throws, you have got to make more than 19 of them. Because those free throws, you miss them, opposing team can get the rebound. And you come away without a point. But you need to make those free throws. Free throws are super important, especially in March. By the end of the year. So, yeah, SEC, they're kind of like the Big Ten, they're beating up on each other in these in-conference games. Everyone's trying to fight for spots in their conference tournaments. They're trying to fight for spots for higher seeds because the higher seeds, you get more buys. And unlike for football, in basketball, this is actually a good thing because these tournaments are so big. Like for football, you have a conference championship game where it's just the top 2 seeds within your conference play each other. Okay? For basketball, there is a huge tournament that's around 14 teams, 16 teams, something like that. But you could play, and this is what NC State did. They played about, I think it was 5 games in their conference tournament, and then 3 days later, because they won their conference championship but got put at the 11 seed and they had to play a playing game, they only got 3 days of rest before playing their playing game, and then they basically played basketball for a whole month. From the beginning of the ACC conference tournament to the Final Four game, they basically played basketball for a whole month without a lot of rest, which is quite impressive. So again, just really bringing that point home, it is important to win your in-conference games. It is very important to win those. We had another huge upset as well this week. We had Minnesota beating Iowa, and this was in Minnesota. Minnesota won 70-67. Iowa was ranked 19th. They're now 12-3. I think. Well, actually, that might. No. They're 12-3, or at least they were after the outcome of the Minnesota game. But Minnesota, they had a huge lead at the end of the first half. They were up 31-24, and then they were basically even for the second half. Iowa put up 43 points in the second half. Minnesota, again, just able to hold on. They put up 39 points. And for Indiana fans, this is great. This is a great outcome for Indiana fans because Indiana lost to Minnesota, and it was initially a shock. But the way Minnesota's been playing, Minnesota could be one of those sneaky teams in the Big Ten that could actually be in the top 5 of the conference. Because Minnesota, I mean, they're 10-5, but they're a sneaky good team. Neither team was really shooting efficiently from the three-point line. Iowa was at 27%, Minnesota at 25%. And I really bring this up because with these Iowa teams, they normally are insanely good from behind the three-point line. They traditionally shoot well from beyond the arc, but that just simply was not the case in this game, and Iowa then had to rely on their field goal percentage or shots, and they shot for just under 40%, while Minnesota was shooting for about 47%. So both teams were about the same on free throws. Minnesota had that edge in the free throws. Quantity-wise, they had 28 attempts versus Iowa's 13. And both teams, turnovers, Iowa had 13, Minnesota had 10. Minnesota also had 10 steals, and that's something that they were doing against Indiana as well. Minnesota, great on defense, forcing steals and turnovers. They can catch you off guard. They're great at guarding those passing lanes. Like, this Minnesota team is sneaky. So that is a team that we will be keeping an eye on for the rest of the year. I mean, we'll see if Minnesota ends up making it into the March Madness tournament, which I don't think a lot of people thought they were going to. But speaking of teams that we need to watch, Nebraska still undefeated after beating Indiana 83-77. Now, I don't know what it is with this Indiana team because they play so well in the first half of these games. And then the second half, it's like the first 10 minutes of the second half, they forget how to play basketball. And then they just give up whatever lead they have. And then they try to crawl back within the last 3 minutes of the game. And then they just can't come back because they didn't give themselves enough time. Indiana was up 39-30 against Nebraska at the end of the first half. And then the second half allowed Nebraska to put up 53 points to their 38 points. It was not good. And part of the issue was Tucker DeVries got into foul trouble early. Offense couldn't really find their rhythm. Normally, Tucker is their guy that kind of leads the rhythm of that offense. Wilkerson wasn't really hitting in the second half as he was in the first half. And the offense just got stagnant. And that's what I mean when I say that they forgot how to play basketball. It's just that the offense just became so stagnant, and Nebraska was able to just kind of waltz their way back into the game. Both teams pretty efficient from the field, around 47%, little below, little under. Three-point percentage, both teams, again, kind of around the same. 41, Nebraska, 37, Indiana. But the turnovers, Indiana had 13. Nebraska only had 7. And Nebraska, especially in the second half, they were getting some big steals. They had 9 steals. I'm pretty sure they were all in the second half because every time I was watching that game in the second half, Nebraska was just coming away with the steal. It was insane. But yeah, Nebraska clearly figured out how to defend against this Hoosier team, and Indiana was just not able to get their offense going when they needed to. So that's what led to the downfall of Indiana. All right, and like I said before, so not going to talk about the national championship game for college football. This week, we're actually going to preview some college basketball games that are going to happen. And then next week, it's going to be national championship game, college football transfer portal, and college football playoff format meetings, because those meetings, the deadline is around the time of the national championship. So that's something that we're going to be talking about as well. But before I get into previewing these college basketball games, I have a message from our sponsor. This broadcast is brought to you by Authentic Impact, a Northwest Indiana executive coaching practice working with family businesses to ensure their legacy. When you started your business, you made a promise to do things differently, better than anyone else. Over time, as the business grows, that promise can get diluted or even lost. Penny Schleier at Authentic Impact helps family business owners reignite that promise, weaving it into team engagement, performance, and hiring so your passion becomes the heartbeat of your company again. Learn more at authentic-impact-coaching.com. All right, so we've got some pretty enticing matchups for college basketball that are coming up this week, some key in-conference games. Starting on Tuesday, we've got Texas A&M versus Tennessee. Texas A&M, they are on a huge run within the SEC conference right now. Last I saw, they were undefeated, and they are still undefeated. Texas A&M is 3-0 in the SEC, 13-3 overall, and they're going up against Tennessee, who is currently ranked, but after the broadcast is broadcasted, the rankings will be out. They might not be ranked at that time. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll be 25th, but they might be just outside of the rankings by the time these two teams play on Tuesday. But that'll be a huge matchup. This could be Texas A&M's first loss within the SEC. This is on the road at Tennessee. So that is a huge, huge game for A&M. Then there's Indiana-Michigan State. Indiana looking to make some kind of statement after their loss to Nebraska. Michigan State would be a great team to do that. Michigan State currently ranked 12th. That will probably change. They will probably get ranked higher due to their dominating performance over the USC Trojans, who were ranked at the time. So I think this one also very interesting. A big battle within the Big Ten. Two traditional basketball powerhouses going at it. I think this will be a dangerous matchup for Indiana just because of how big and explosive Michigan State is on both sides of the ball. Indiana doesn't really have a lot of big guys. They can hit from the outside, but when they're not hitting from the outside, they have to go into the paint, and compared to Michigan State, they just have bigger and taller guys. They're going to be able to defend in the paint a lot easier than Indiana is going to be able to. So I think it'll be an interesting matchup, but I do think that Michigan State will probably come out on top, but an interesting matchup it will be nonetheless. Then we've got a ranked-on-ranked matchup within the ACC. Virginia traveling to Louisville. Virginia quietly just sitting there at 23. Virginia normally has been good within the past 10 years. Last year, we didn't really see a lot from Virginia or really the ACC in general in basketball, but this year feels a lot different. It feels like North Carolina is back. It feels like Louisville is back. Maybe Virginia is back too, and we'll see when these two teams play each other on Tuesday at 6. Then we've got UConn Seton Hall. Now, UConn currently ranked 4th, Seton Hall currently unranked. I think this will be an interesting matchup simply because Seton Hall, they're 14-2 right now. They only have one loss within the conference. They're 3rd in the standings behind Villanova. Seton Hall could maybe upset UConn and give UConn their second loss, their first Big East loss. And this game, I mean, if depending on where it is, looks like it's going to be at Seton Hall. That could be a trap game for UConn. It could be a trap game for UConn. Now, UConn, kind of like Michigan and Arizona and Iowa State, have been dominant in their games. They have been dominant for the most part, especially really since the tournaments, like the beginning of season tournaments that all these teams played in. So I'm very curious to see how these two teams match up against each other. I think UConn should win, but I think it'll be a sneaky good game. And I could see Seton Hall maybe coming away with the win. Then we've also got a ranked matchup on Tuesday within the Big 12, Iowa State versus Kansas. Kansas kind of going on the up and up, had a great win against TCU. Iowa State has just been rolling through their opponents ever since that Purdue game, where Iowa State walked into West Lafayette and beat Purdue 81-58. Iowa State also beat Iowa 66-62. They've been on a roll in the Big 12 as well. They beat West Virginia 80-59, Baylor 70-60, Oklahoma State 83-71, and Oklahoma State has been a kind of sneaky good program so far this year within the Big 12. Now they're going up against a tough Kansas team at Kansas. So we could see something interesting happen here. This one is going to be at 8. So keep an eye out for that one as well. Then we've got a currently ranked unranked matchup, which it might not be by the end of this broadcast. On Wednesday, Purdue versus Iowa. And the reason I say what I said is because Iowa lost to Minnesota, who's an unranked team, which means Iowa will probably fall out of the rankings. So I think this one could be interesting. Iowa is they have been a mid-tier team within the Big Ten. Purdue normally not, and they normally don't lose to Iowa. But this has been a really interesting year of college basketball from what I've seen, and I could see Iowa maybe walking into Purdue, but not really. But I think it will be an interesting game, though, just because of, Iowa, they're going to need something to come back into the rankings. They're going to need to build some momentum. A win against Purdue would do that. Purdue looking to continue their Big Ten dominance, and a win against Iowa will do that. It will further establish that dominance due to Iowa, again, currently being a ranked team within the Big Ten. Then we've got Vanderbilt, Texas. And I bring this one up because, Texas, they are coming off a big win against Alabama. Vanderbilt, they are still undefeated. They're one of the last remaining undefeated teams within college basketball as of right now. 16-0, 3-0 within the conference, just like Texas A&M. And now they're going to be going up against like I said, Texas Longhorns team that's coming off a huge win against Alabama. And Vandy is going to be traveling to Texas for this game. So this one could be a trap game for Vandy. This could be one where Vandy maybe slips up. Texas continuing to build some momentum there. Okay? That one's going to be Wednesday at 8 Central Time. Then we've got the Baylor-Kansas game. This one, normally, that's on Friday. Normally, this one it's a classic. It's a very competitive game a lot of the times. Kansas, obviously, currently ranked. I believe they will go up in the rankings, later today. But, the rankings come out after the broadcast is done. Little inconvenient for college basketball, but, it is what it is. But, yeah. Then we've also got a ranked-on-ranked matchup, Virginia versus SMU, an ACC in conference battle on Saturday, January 17th. That one also could be very interesting. SMU, they had a pretty interesting win to say the least. They beat North Carolina 97-83 earlier this month. So maybe SMU pulls a trick out of the hat and they beat this ranked Virginia team. But yeah, I'm very intrigued of this matchup just because, both of these programs have just been slowly climbing the rankings and finding their way to the spotlight this year for college basketball. Then, of course, there's Alabama versus Oklahoma. Alabama travels to Oklahoma. Oklahoma has been good. I mean, they're not too bad this year in college basketball, but I think Alabama should beat this team. But it'll be at Oklahoma, and after Alabama losing to Texas, maybe Alabama goes on a little bit of a downward spiral and slips up again. I don't think that's likely against Oklahoma this year, but the SEC in college basketball, if last year was a testament to this, they were going at it last year in college basketball. I mean, it showed. It showed. They had, I think it was 15 teams in the college basketball March Madness tournament. So, we could see something crazy there. We've also got Kentucky, Tennessee on January 17th as well. That one, it's a bit of a rivalry in basketball. It's a very strong rivalry in college basketball. And these two teams are very hostile towards each other. So in Kentucky, right now unranked, kind of on a little bit of a downturn. They lost to Missouri. I believe they did accumulate a win after that, but Kentucky's been pretty inconsistent this year, losing to teams that they should beat, like Missouri. I mean, Missouri was a team that they definitely should have won against, but it is what it is. Minnesota, Illinois is another one on Saturday. That one will be interesting because, again, Minnesota has been quietly beating these ranked Big Ten teams. They've just been, counting them up on their fingers and, counting they're just making a graveyard of ranked Big Ten teams at this point. Minnesota rolling right now. And they're going to Illinois. Illinois currently ranked 16th. That might change. But I think this will be a very, very close game. Very close game. And finally, I think the last game... No, there's two games. So we've got two more games that we're going to talk about here, just leading in. We've got Purdue versus USC. Now, this one, Purdue, very dominant team in the Big Ten. They are traveling to LA for this game, which scares me a little bit. Not going to lie. I think, Big Ten and travel it has a huge impact, and we've seen a lot of the teams in college football talk about this, how they have to travel almost 20,000 miles each season just because half of their games are on the other side of the country. But in college basketball, it's that, but it's on another level of worse. Because these college basketball teams, they play multiple times per week. It's not like they only play on Saturday. Maybe they play Friday night. But, it's not like they travel once a week. Some of these teams travel twice a week in these in-conference matchups. So this could be one for Purdue where could be a little difficult travel-wise. It is on a Saturday, though. It is going to be 5 p.m. Central Time, so it'll be 6 p.m. Purdue time. So for them, it's not like it's going to be a stupidly early morning game for them, or at least like clockwise, but it's also not going to be a night game for them either. So I think it won't have as much of an impact, but that is something to keep in mind for college basketball, because travel with in-conference, especially, not even just within the Big Ten, but with the ACC, with SMU. I mean, SMU not as much as Cal and Stanford, though. Cal and Stanford on the other side of the country compared to literally every single other team in the ACC conference. So travel Travel is huge for this. We've also got BYU, Texas Tech. BYU ranked 9th and Texas Tech ranked 14th. Those rankings, like I've said time and time again, I feel like I've said this a lot, but I just want to, again, just drive the point home that the rankings come out after the broadcast is over, which drives me nuts. And I wish that they came out before. But, I mean, because I'd be reacting to the rankings too. I'd be reacting to the college basketball rankings. But by the time, I look at the rankings, it's over. So I apologize in advance, and I will keep apologizing until the committee decides to come out with their rankings at an earlier time, at a more convenient time for us. Like, come on now. But anyways, sorry, I got a little carried away there. But BYU, Texas Tech, both teams look great right now within their conference. They're in a pretty solid spot. BYU currently ranked 3rd in the Big 12. Texas Tech currently ranked 5th. BYU undefeated in Big 12 play. Texas Tech with 1 loss in Big 12 play. So Texas Tech could bring BYU down with a win here. They would kind of move up, but not really. They'd just, I guess, be tied with BYU in the head-to-head rankings within the conference. But otherwise, it wouldn't move them up too much, because you can't really move up much further. 5th is pretty high, especially at this point in the season when you've only played 3 to 4 in conference matchups. So yeah, we'll see more fluctual changes later, but yeah, BYU, Texas Tech, I think that one will be interesting. BYU normally good from outside the arc, and they've been doing great even though Mark Pope, the now coach of Kentucky, he left for Kentucky. He didn't get fired from BYU. He left for Kentucky. BYU really hasn't skipped a beat at all. They haven't really skipped a beat in college basketball. They've still been consistently good. So, yeah, that's going to be a game to keep an eye on. And looking at these two teams and how high they're ranked, this could be one that determines where they sit within the Big 12 tournament and, what seed they get, whether they get 3 bye weeks or whether they get 2 bye weeks, and maybe whether or not they play who's bottom of the conference right now, whether they play Utah or whether they play Cincinnati. And Cincinnati's not even a bad team. They're just 0-3 right now in Big 12 conference play. So, again, like these in-conference matchups, like if you get seated in a good spot, then you have a pretty easy path to the conference championship. And if you make it to the conference championship, you're almost guaranteed a spot in the March Madness tournament. So, yeah, these matchups mean a lot. They mean a lot. All right, so before we go, there is a couple of other games that I'm looking at that I do also want to talk about. Number 1, Arizona versus number 25, UCF. UCF quietly climbing the rankings right now. They beat Cincinnati on Sunday, 73-72, in a very close game. They did lose to Oklahoma State, but UCF, part of the reason why they're ranked is because they beat Kansas. They beat them 81-75. So UCF, they've got that ranked win. They have some other pretty solid wins as well. They beat Texas A&M earlier this year, 86-74. They did lose to Vanderbilt, but they lost in a pretty close affair. It was 105-93. So, yeah, it's UCF is a little bit sneaky, kind of like Minnesota, but I think UCF has beaten some better teams. They have lost to worse teams than Minnesota has lost to, though. So, yeah, we'll see. I think Big 12 has a little bit more cred in basketball at this point than the Big 10 does. But, yeah, it's very, very interesting game that will be watched. I do think Arizona wins. They are traveling to UCF, so maybe this could be a trap game. Maybe Arizona just doesn't have a good day And you know what? Arizona is traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast because Central Florida, they are on the East. So Arizona's going to have to jump, I believe it's 4 time zones to play this game. And this game's at 3 p.m. So it's going to be a late morning game for Arizona. So will be a very interesting game. All right. And I know I said like there's only 2 more games, but I keep seeing some of these other games and I keep getting more intrigued. But we've got the last game, Duke versus Stanford. Now, Stanford has had some pretty interesting games, to say the least. Kind of like Cal, a bit inconsistent. Like, I think Stanford's best win is against Louisville. They beat Louisville 80-76 on January 2nd. But then they lost to Notre Dame 47-40. And this is a Notre Dame team, mind you, that lost to the Purdue Fort Wayne Mastodons. Okay? Like, that's basically, it's basically FCS. Okay? Just to, I guess, compare because college basketball, there's a lot more, FCS schools in football, like Division I FCS in football, that participate in Division I basketball. Now, Division I basketball is a little bit more broad. So, yeah, big loss for Stanford right there. But then they beat Colorado, has pretty solid standing right now in the Big 12. They also beat Minnesota back in November this year. So this Stanford team, very inconsistent, but they could they also play North Carolina on Wednesday. So maybe this Stanford team just decides to go absolutely nuts, kind of like what I said with Cal, and say, you know what? Screw it. We're going to go and get a win. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. I thought that was funny. But, yeah, so like I said before, next week we're going to be talking about the College Football Playoff National Championship, giving some insights on that game, talking about all the factors in that game, environment, like home field, all of that stuff. We're also going to be talking about the transfer portal, because the transfer portal window is going to be closing just after the broadcast gets published. And then we're also going to be talking about the college football playoff format, because the committee, the committee and the commissioners have all been in meetings for regarding the college football playoff format. Last I saw on ESPN, according to Heather Dinich, the committee, the people, are very close to reaching a settlement for a 16-team playoff format as early as 2026. So next year, we could see a 16-team playoff format. Obviously, Big Ten and SEC have been pushing different formats. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm not going to be talking about this alone, though. I am going to be bringing on a guest for the next broadcast. So you will want to tune in. It's going to be Chandler from Atlas Sports. He talks all college football, talks a lot about the transfer portal, breaks down games. He has been at this for a while. He's actually part of the reason why I kind of got into the podcasting game and the social media game, because a lot of the sports takes that I've seen from some people on TikTok, Instagram, social media, and also mainstream media are pretty ridiculous and can be completely biased, and they won't admit that they're biased. So he's one of the creators that I've seen that is actually he looks at it very objectively. So I'm very excited for you guys to hear what he has to say about the end to the 2025-2026 college football season. So tune in next week. And again, if you aren't going to be able to listen to it on WVLP, you can also tune in on Spotify, Patreon, YouTube, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts. With that being said, see you guys all next time. Slide out.